When 29-year-old blind graphic designer Sophie Anderson stood before Frank Caprio with 6 parking tickets issued in 7 days, prosecutors assumed she was lying about her disability to avoid fines. But when Frank asked how a blind woman could possibly drive and park illegally, what Sophie revealed about her guide dog Max's secret training, the revolutionary technology she'd been testing, and the traffic officers who refused to believe a blind person could be independent, would expose discrimination in law enforcement, and prove that sometimes our assumptions about disability are more limiting than the disability itself. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Also, let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your city right now. We love connecting with our amazing community around the world. Providence Municipal Court had seen many unusual cases, but when Sophie Anderson's name was called, something remarkable walked into the courtroom. The 29-year-old woman entered confidently, guided by a beautiful golden retriever wearing a service vest with the name Max embroidered on it. Judge Frank Caprio immediately noticed the white cane in Sophie's hand and the guide dog at her side. "Mrs. Anderson, please approach the bench, and your service dog is welcome in the courtroom." Sophie walked forward with Max guiding her perfectly around the chairs and up to the podium. Her movements were confident despite her obvious visual impairment. Her eyes didn't track movement, and had the unfocused look of someone who couldn't see. "Miss Anderson," Frank began, looking at the stack of tickets with growing confusion. "You're here regarding 6 parking violations issued over the past 7 days. All 6 were issued to vehicles parked in handicapped spaces without proper permits." Sophie stood straight, her hand resting on Max's head. "Yes, Your Honor, I received all 6 tickets." Frank set down his papers. "Mrs. Anderson, I need to ask a direct question. Are you blind?" "Yes, Your Honor. I've been completely blind since birth. I have no vision whatsoever." Frank looked at the tickets again, then back at Sophie. "Then I'm very confused. These tickets were all issued for illegal parking. How is a blind person getting parking tickets?" Sophie's answer would reveal an infuriating truth. "Your Honor, I don't drive. I've never driven. I can't drive," Sophie explained clearly. "Those tickets were issued to Uber and Lyft drivers who were dropping me off or picking me up from various locations around Providence." The courtroom stirred with surprise. Frank leaned forward. "The tickets were issued to your ride-share drivers?" "Yes, sir. And somehow they all ended up in my name even though I wasn't the driver. I don't own the vehicles and I was just a passenger." Frank picked up the first ticket. "This one says driver Sophie Anderson and lists your address." "I know, Your Honor. That's the problem. The parking enforcement officers saw me getting out of these vehicles in handicapped parking spaces and assumed I was the driver parking illegally." Frank was trying to understand. "But you're clearly blind. How did they think you were driving?" Sophie's expression grew frustrated. "That's exactly what I tried to explain to them every single time, but they didn't believe me. The pattern of discrimination was about to be exposed." Frank asked Sophie to explain each incident in detail. She pulled out her phone, which spoke aloud as she navigated it, and brought up her detailed notes about each ticket. The first ticket was on October 15th. I was being dropped off at Rhode Island Hospital for a doctor's appointment. The Uber driver pulled into a handicapped spot near the entrance to let me out. An officer approached as I was getting out with Max. "What happened?" The officer asked for my driver's license and vehicle registration. I explained I'm blind and I'm not the driver. I'm a passenger. I showed him Max, my guide dog, and my white cane. But the officer said, and I quote, "I don't care about your dog. You parked in a handicapped spot without a permit." Sophie's voice was tight with controlled anger. I tried to explain that the Uber driver was just dropping me off, that I would never park there because I don't drive. The officer said I was making excuses and wrote the ticket in my name. Frank was appalled. "Did you explain to the officer that you're blind?" "Multiple times, Your Honor," he said. "Plenty of people fake disabilities to get out of tickets." He literally said that to me while I stood there with a guide dog and a white cane. The other 5 tickets revealed a disturbing pattern. Sophie went through each ticket systematically. The second was at her workplace where a Lyft driver had briefly stopped in a loading zone to let her out. Same story? Officer didn't believe she was blind, wrote the ticket in her name. The third, fourth, and fifth tickets were all from the same officer. Officer James McCarthy. He had ticketed 3 different rideshare vehicles, dropping Sophie off at a restaurant, a grocery store, and her apartment building. Officer McCarthy told me the third time that I was abusing the system and pretending to be disabled. Sophie explained, her voice shaking slightly. He said he'd seen me walking confidently and using my phone, so he knew I could see. Frank's expression darkened. He said that to you? Yes, Your Honor. I tried to explain that blind people can walk confidently with mobility training and guide dogs. I showed him how my phone uses voice commands and screen readers. He said I was too functional to be really blind. The 6th ticket was the most egregious. Sophie had been dropped off at the DMV to renew her state identification card. The officer watched her enter the building, followed her inside, and confronted her at the DMV counter. He told the DMV staff that I was faking my disability and trying to get a fraudulent ID. Sophie said the DMV staff who have known me for years and processed my previous blind ID cards had to defend me and explained that I'm legitimately blind. Frank launched an immediate investigation. Frank called for a recess and requested that all 6 ticketing officers report to the courthouse. He also called the Rhode Island Commission for the Blind and asked them to send a representative. Dr. Patricia Williams, director of the Commission for the Blind, arrived within an hour. Your Honor, Sophie Anderson is indeed completely blind. She's been registered with our agency since childhood. She uses a professionally trained guide dog and mobility cane. There's no question about her disability status. Frank showed Dr. Williams the tickets. How is this possible? How can someone mistake a blind person with a guide dog and white cane for someone who's faking? Dr. Williams sighed heavily. Your Honor, this happens more often than you'd think. Many people have misconceptions about blindness. They think all blind people wear dark glasses and stare vacantly into space. When they see someone like Sophie who's independent, confident, professionally dressed, using technology, they assume she can't really be blind. But she has a guide dog. Frank pointed out. People fake service animals all the time. So, some officers have become skeptical of all service dogs. They don't understand the rigorous training and certification process that real guide dogs like Max go through. The officers were called to testify. Officer James McCarthy, who had issued 3 of the 6 tickets, appeared uncomfortable as he took the stand. Frank's expression was stern. Officer McCarthy, did you issue 3 parking citations to Miss Anderson? Yes, Your Honor. She was parking illegally in handicapped spaces. Officer, Ms. Anderson is blind. She doesn't drive. How could she park illegally? McCarthy shifted. Your Honor, with all respect, she doesn't look blind. She walks around fine, uses her phone, and I've seen her recognize people and respond to visual cues. Sophie spoke up from her seat. I respond to auditory cues, Officer McCarthy. I hear people's voices, footsteps, and phone notifications. Not everything requires vision. Frank addressed McCarthy directly. Officer, when Ms. Anderson showed you her guide dog and explained she was blind, what did you do? I didn't believe her, Your Honor. There are a lot of people who fake disabilities. Did you ask to see her identification? Did you notice that her ID card is marked as issued to a blind person? McCarthy was silent. Frank, did you make any effort to verify her claim, or did you simply assume she was lying? I assumed she was lying, sir. I was wrong. The systematic problem Frank discovered was shocking. Frank requested records from Providence Parking Enforcement showing how many tickets had been issued to people with documented disabilities. The results were disturbing. In the past year, Providence Parking Enforcement had issued 247 tickets to people who had registered disabilities. Of those, 89 were issued to people who were blind or visually impaired, and 62 of those were issued to passengers in rideshare vehicles, not drivers. The pattern was clear. Officers were seeing disabled people being dropped off in handicapped spaces, assuming they were the drivers parking illegally and issuing tickets without properly investigating. "This is a systemic failure," Frank announced. "We're not just talking about Ms. Anderson's 6 tickets. We're talking about dozens, possibly hundreds of people with disabilities being unfairly ticketed because officers make assumptions based on appearance." Frank called the Providence police chief and the head of parking enforcement to the courthouse. "Defective immediately," Frank ordered. "No parking ticket will be issued to anyone claiming to be a passenger rather than a driver without verification. Officers must confirm the actual driver's identity before issuing any citation." Sophie's guide dog, Max, had a secret that amazed everyone. During a break in the proceedings, Frank asked Sophie about Max. "I noticed Max is extremely well trained. Where did he receive his training?" Sophie's face lit up. "Max is from Guide Dogs for the Blind. He went through 2 years of specialized training. But here's what most people don't know. Max has additional training that helps me navigate in ways that seem almost magical to sighted people." She demonstrated. "Max, find the door." Max immediately turned and walked Sophie directly to the courtroom door, navigating perfectly around all furniture and people. Max can find specific locations on command. Doors, stairs, chairs, counters, even people he knows. That's why I appear to move so confidently. Max is essentially my eyes. "Show me your phone," Frank requested, curious about the technology Sophie had mentioned. Sophie pulled out her iPhone and demonstrated. The phone spoke everything aloud. Text messages, emails, apps. "This is called voiceover. It reads everything on my screen. So when Officer McCarthy said I couldn't be blind because I use my phone, he simply didn't understand that blind people have been using smartphones for over a decade." She showed other technology. Her smartwatch that vibrated to give her notifications, apps that identify objects using AI, even apps that read money denominations and colors. "This is why I seem too functional to be blind," Sophie explained. "But functionality doesn't mean I can see. It means I've learned to adapt." Frank's ruling would change enforcement policy. After hearing all testimony and reviewing all evidence, Frank made his ruling. All 6 tickets against Sophie Anderson are dismissed. Furthermore, I'm issuing a formal apology from this court for the harassment and discrimination Miss Anderson experienced. He wasn't finished. "I'm also ordering mandatory disability awareness training for all Providence parking enforcement officers. This training will be conducted by the Rhode Island Commission for the Blind and other disability advocacy organizations." Frank turned to Officer McCarthy. "Officer, you will personally complete 40 hours of disability awareness training and issue a written apology to Ms. Anderson." McCarthy nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "Miss Anderson, I'm sorry. I made assumptions based on ignorance. I was wrong and I will do better." Sophie nodded graciously. "I accept your apology, officer. I hope this helps you understand that disability looks different for everyone." The policy changes that followed protected thousands. Frank's ruling led to sweeping changes in Providence parking enforcement. All tickets issued to people with disabilities in the previous year were reviewed and 147 were found to be wrongly issued and dismissed. The passenger verification protocol was established. Officers must confirm the actual driver's identity before issuing any parking ticket to vehicles in handicapped spaces. All parking enforcement officers received 16 hours of disability awareness training covering invisible disabilities, service animals, mobility aids, and disability rights. A new appeals process was created specifically for disability-related ticket disputes. Within 6 months, wrongful tickets issued to people with disabilities dropped by 94%. Sophie became an advocate for disability awareness. Sophie used her experience to launch a nonprofit called Blindness Beyond Stereotypes, educating law enforcement, businesses, and the public about visual impairment. "People think blindness means helplessness," Sophie explains in her presentations. "But I have a degree in graphic design. I work full-time as a digital accessibility consultant. I live independently, and I navigate the world successfully. Blindness is an inconvenience, not an inability." Her TED Talk, What Blind Really Looks Like, has been viewed over 5 million times. In it, she demonstrates all her adaptive technology and shows how Max guides her through complex environments. The talk ends with a powerful message. If you saw me in a parking lot getting out of a car, you might assume I'm faking my disability because I look too normal. But the real problem isn't my disability. It's your assumption about what disability should look like. Max the guide dog became a celebrity. Max, Sophie's guide dog, became somewhat famous through her advocacy work. He now has his own Instagram account. A Max the Guide hero with over 200,000 followers showing what guide dog work really looks like. People see Max and think he's just a cute dog, Sophie explains. But Max is a highly trained professional who keeps me safe every single day. When officers didn't believe I was blind, they were essentially saying Max's years of training and work were fake. That was offensive, not just to me, but to Max and all service dogs. Max was awarded the Service Dog Excellence Award by the Guide Dogs for the Blind organization for his exemplary work and for raising awareness about guide dogs through Sophie's advocacy. The technology revolution for blind independence. Sophie's case highlighted how technology has transformed blind independence. She now works as a consultant helping tech companies make their products accessible to blind users. 20 years ago, a blind person using a smartphone would have been impossible. Sophie explains. Now I can do almost everything a sighted person can do. Read, send emails, shop online, navigate, even design graphics using specialized software. She works with major companies like Apple, Google, and Microsoft on accessibility features. Her work has influenced how millions of blind people interact with technology. Officer McCarthy thought I couldn't be blind because I used my phone competently, Sophie says. Now I help design the technology that makes that possible for blind people worldwide. The judge who changed how we see disability. Judge Frank Caprio keeps one of Sophie's dismissed tickets framed in his chambers with a notation dismissed because assumptions about disability are often more limiting than the disability itself. Frank became an advocate for disability rights in the legal system. Speaking at conferences about implicit bias and the importance of questioning our assumptions. Sophie taught me something crucial. Frank tells audiences. We think we're being vigilant when we question people's disabilities, but often we're just revealing our own ignorance about what disability actually looks like. Frank worked with the Rhode Island legislature to pass Sophie's law, requiring all law enforcement officers in the state to receive disability awareness training as part of their basic training. The lasting impact of 6 unjust tickets. Today, Sophie continues her advocacy work while working full-time as a digital accessibility consultant. She's married. She met her husband, ironically, through an accessible dating app she helped design. And Max remains her faithful guide. The 6 tickets that brought her to Frank's courtroom are now displayed at the Rhode Island School for the Blind, where Sophie regularly speaks to students. These tickets represent every time someone assumed I couldn't do something because I'm blind, Sophie tells students. But they also represent the moment the system changed to protect all of us. Your disability doesn't define your limitations. Other people's assumptions do. And we can change those assumptions. Officer McCarthy, who issued 3 of the 6 tickets, became one of Sophie's strongest advocates. He now teaches disability awareness to other officers and volunteers with blindness beyond stereotypes. I was the officer who thought he was doing his job by questioning Sophie's disability. McCarthy tells officers during training. I was actually just being ignorant and discriminatory. Don't be like I was. Listen to disabled people when they tell you about their experiences. The Providence Parking Enforcement Office now has a permanent display with information about disability rights and adaptive technology. Max the guide dog's photo is featured prominently with the caption, "Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear service vests." Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom proved that day that justice means questioning our assumptions, especially when those assumptions harm people who are simply trying to live independently despite their disabilities.